Okay, guys, it's been a while. Let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We've been caught up in electoral politics. We've been caught up with the genocide in Gaza. We've been caught up with our interviews, with all these different kinds of things that we've kind of let this escape our media cycle, which is something we never want to do on this channel with these kinds of things. I feel it's pertinent for someone to talk about them because a lot of other bigger channels aren't going to. They're going to focus only on domestic issues. And there's been some new developments. Obviously, also with Trump coming into office, it kind of changes the course of action as to what is expected with U.S. policy, what is expected from Ukraine as they have to change course because obviously Trump is liable to just hand over Ukrainian land to Russia like it's a bake sale. So Biden and Zelensky, since the election, have been game planning and trying to think of what the best course of action to take. Russia has been escalating in their own right, probably feeling emboldened, and it's kind of mished to make this hosh-posh of chaos. I mean, anything in this region seems to be chaos and has been since 2014. It's either chaos or we're ignoring occupation and all these other kinds of things like we do other places in the world. And no matter what, we're on the wrong side of history, it seems like. But a lot of what these developments also include outside of the Russian escalations is aid and munitions being approved by Biden that I did also want to speak on briefly and, just to help catch people up to the larger picture, as obviously this conflict just hit the 1,000-day mark on how long it's been going on, which is insane, with Russia seeing massive gains early on before being rather thwarted in progress once we began sending munitions to Ukraine. And Russia is doing the genocide thing. It's probably not genocide, but I just want to keep in people's mind, the way we've kind of whitewashed, especially with how Republicans are so anti-Ukraine because they're pro-Russia, but they don't want to admit that part, but anti-Ukraine openly at least. It seems that we've kind of whitewashed what Russia is doing. These are people who are also bombing churches and schools, they're killing civilians disproportionately. The death toll has been I think it's 0.5% of the population, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in just 2 years, I mean, it's pretty brutal. And a lot of the people on the right, instead of addressing this, talking about, hey, Ukrainian children were dying as their land gets stolen from them and they're being forced out of their homes and their buildings are being bombed. It's just yeah, but Ukraine was Russia's once, so we need to let them take that back. And it's I'm sure we're going to have that same energy when the Native Americans come to America to take all of that back. But obviously, once the progress from Russia started getting thwarted, they were doing all these horrendous things to Ukraine. They were bombing them, aggressing, feeling like they could get away with it. Biden decides, let's send them munitions, let's send them aid. Ukraine thwarted them to the point that they were actually even recently, I think in August, able to push into Russian territory and take a little bit of Russian territory, or at least push the troops back, with the hope of doing that being that if Russia is invading over here, if they can push into Russia on the opposite flank over here, then Russia, has to send some resources over here, pulls away the resources, gives Ukraine a better chance at defending where is being invaded, right? Which hasn't exactly happened. Again, they're still kind of in this stalemate. Russia will do a little bit here, then Ukraine will do a little bit here. And no progress is really being made one way or the other, but Russia is making some headwinds in the Donetsk region. And with Russia deciding now to also bring in North Korean troops to the fight, I think around 10,000 North Korean troops, which is a major update, which is massive. They're expanding their coalition. It has led to Biden changing course to some of his actions as well, and not just doing, the lame duck president thing of, well, we'll just wait for the next presidential administration to come in and see what they want to do. First, he approved for Ukraine to use our Army tactical missile systems, the ARMTAC or attack me. That's it. Or attack them. That's it. Sorry. ATACMs. And essentially this is advanced missiles that allow for longer range strikes. I think it's 190 miles, whereas the missiles they've been using has only been 50 miles. The hopes of this is that they can erode capabilities in Moscow, do some targeted key strikes into Russia that'll keep the troops from being able to reach the front line, which again, downstream should be able to help Ukraine push back those who have already breached that line, and to also dissuade North Korea from sending more troops, as if they realize hey, our troops could die at large numbers sending them, maybe they won't want to send as much. And this sort of escalation began after Russia launched their own massive cross-border attack at one of the largest cities in Ukraine. They did this back in May, which prompted Ukraine to fire back, obviously. So what it is here, and a lot of the time people will try to blame America or Ukraine for this war. And what is happening is Russia is incrementally expanding and kind of escalating what they're doing in this conflict to where they'll push further into Ukraine. They'll hit a bigger city. They'll attack more civilian targets. And then they'll wait it out a little bit. And then Ukraine is like, hey, we need America's help. Russia's doing this. We send aid. Ukraine starts pushing back. And then like the pro-Russia people, the Tim Pools of America are like, Ukraine is escalating this conflict. And it's like, well, Russia did just launch a massive cross-border attack at a large city with tons and tens of thousands of civilians and like all of this. And nobody cares about that though. It's all about, well, how dare Russia retaliate? Like it's kind of weird. And it mainly comes again as responses from Ukraine, where Russia is escalating and then also looking to expand its coalition, now adding in 10,000 North Korean troops, with Putin probably, again, being emboldened by the election outcome, knowing there won't be much aid or pushback, for that matter, coming from the U.S. in just a short few months. So let's take what we can get, which also, on the flip side of that coin, is probably also what Ukraine is thinking and should be thinking now, is like, okay, well, if we are about to have to broker this deal where we're probably going to have to give up land, let's take as much Russian land as we can so we have more leverage when brokering this deal. So that's another reason why Ukraine would want to push into Russia. And Biden also just yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, approved anti-personnel landmine. These are kind of like claymores, but they're under the ground, to be sent to Ukraine. This is something we've hesitated on sending because of the potential for civilian harm. But the way Russia has been using them with like no restraint against Ukraine, and then now with a couple provisions we've added into them, I think there's like the battery, so to speak, for them will like lose charge after a few days, which puts more civilian safety measures in place. Biden has decided to finally send these over, let Ukraine use them to defend themselves, hoping to further push back these kind of ground forces invading from North Korea and Russia. So it'll be interesting to see what further shifts happen going forward. Who knows what's on the table with Trump having these secret conversations with Putin. They could have made some sort of quid pro quo deal or anything sinister. Elon Musk has been having secret conversations with Putin as well. So I've been kind of purposely refraining from speaking about this because, I mean, a lot is about to change really quickly, I feel like, with the conflict. So I'd rather kind of see what's going to happen rather than talking about it like, oh, in this light and in this framing and this is what's going on, when, I mean, after January 20th, snap of the fingers, everything might change, right? So, but we are looking at Russia essentially wants the Donbass region. They definitely want Crimea. They want more than just Crimea, though. And they also want Ukraine to formally agree to never join NATO. While Ukraine wants all of its territory back and probably to join NATO, but them joining NATO isn't like, they're not going to not stop the war if they get all their territory back, but they can't join NATO. Like that's, obviously it's kind of like a fragile thing. Who knows when Ukraine, if they could ever join NATO, right? So that's kind of where the two sides stand. We, of course, because of the Budapest Memorandum, we agreed to defend it. 1994, we signed a deal with Ukraine. Russia also signed it on this deal, and they've broken this deal also, by the way. But the Budapest Memorandum, which Ukraine agreed that they would denuclearize, they would stop their production of nuclear arms, their nuclear weaponry, if we agreed to defend them if Russia or other countries ever invaded, and Russia agreed to never invade, right? So that is kind of how this trio formed, of so to speak. Obviously, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Not the Soviet Union anymore. Russia wants to kind of get the old guard back together, so to speak. We can't let that happen. We have NATO allies in the region. Obviously, Ukraine, we've been kind of on the fence about letting them in NATO, but defending them because they're a sovereign country. And more importantly, because we brokered a deal with them. I think getting more countries to denuclearize is always going to be a positive. I think sticking to agreements we've made in the past is always going to be a positive, because how are we going to be taken serious in the future if we've broken past agreements? So who knows? I don't know. What I do know is that it seems like with Trump winning that we are going to allow Putin to get his way, allow Putin to annex land, which is, again, going to violate international law. Annexing land is a violation of international law. And we're also going to reward the aggression of a Russian dictator and autocrat because, make America great again.